Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about Yawm-e-Istehsal, which is to be, of course, commemorated on 5th of August on Monday. The Kashmiri struggle, we all know, as every Pakistani is extremely sensitive and cognizant of our Kashmiri brethren and their struggle each day. The observance of Yawm-e-Istehsal, All Parties Hurriyat Conference APHC has called for August 5th to be observed as Black Day, Yawm-e-Istehsal. Of course, it aims to highlight India's illegal occupation of Jammu and Kashmir and reaffirm the Kashmiris' people's struggle for the right of self-determination. We'll be talking about, of course, the struggle of the Kashmiri brethren. We'll be talking about the consistent brutality that we've seen come from India, the way that the torture there, the way that the Kashmiri Muslims are consistently denied the right of self-determination. The United Nations resolutions have been blatantly flouted left, right and center. We'll be talking about all of this, the ramifications of this, and of course, how Pakistan continues to highlight and stand by the Kashmiri brethren till this day, of course, continuing to do so as always. I have with me Dr. Awais Bin Wasi, who is a Kashmir expert. Thank you for being with us today. We also have with us Lieutenant General Retired Raza Muhammad, who is former President of NDU. Thank you for being with us today. Dr. Awais, like I said, of course, August 5th is supposed to be Yawm-e-Istehsal. We want to remember, not that we ever forget, the struggle of our Kashmiri brethren and the way that they suffer day in and day out. The brutality that comes from across the border as far as, India is concerned. Of course, we've also seen extremism run rampant under the leadership of Modi recently. Can you tell us a little bit about how, of course, we've seen the demographic changes being made, we've seen how India has tried to change the face of Kashmir, but there's a spillover effect, is there not, in India also?
Yes, when for the past 75 years, India was unable to suppress the, mass uprising and the sentiment of the freedom. So BJP government, what it did was that it scrapped Article 370 in 5th August 2019, and now 2024, 5 years have been lapsed. And at that time, when they scrapped or watered down that article, there were some claims that they made, and those claims were that we are removing it, we are revoking it because we want to bring prosperity, and we want to prosperity in Jammu and Kashmir, and we want to alleviate poverty in that. But if you see the the reality after 5 years, so the ground belies their claim. For example, in terms of poverty, 21%, according to one Indian report I came across, in all the Indian states and union territory, the poverty or the unemployment rate is 7 point some percent. But in India, in Jammu and Kashmir, 21% unemployment rate is there. Similarly, in the local economy, almost Apple industry, it faced a massive blow. Similarly, in hotel industry, I came across a report in which it was reported that almost 50 hotels run by the local people, local Kashmiris, they were shut down, and the other hotels, they were on lease, so their lease agreement was also to be annulled. So similarly, if you take the other indicators, for example, law and order situation, or the normalcy which India wanted to bring, if you see it. So the reality is that in Jammu and Kashmir, there are 14 jail complexes, and all these complexes are filled with prisoners, and even beyond their capacity, and all of them, they are political prisoners, human rights defenders, journalists, students, lawyers, civil society activists, women, and even children. So I fail to understand that how far these claims are in line with the reality on the ground.
Let me go to Altaf Hussain Wani Sab, Chairman KIIR. Wani Sab, there is, of course, we know of the brutality that's come, that spews into, Jammu Kashmir. We've seen the way that India has behaved consistently. And of course, Dr. Awais here has been talking about how the claim that, they were going to bring prosperity, whereas the reality today is vastly different from what India claimed that it would do. As far as the UN reaction is concerned, as far as the UN resolutions are concerned, how do you look at the situation there, from the legal angle? Do you think that there is hope in trying to agitate and continue to agitate? Of course, Pakistan stands behind its Kashmiri brethren at all times. Altaf Sab, can you hear me? There's a problem with audio. General Sab, again, the same question to you. There is, consistently the effort that is made on the legal side, and we've spoken about this from time to time. Do you think there are, as far as United Nations is concerned, we've also, as far as the resolutions are concerned, India continues to flout these resolutions blatantly, and yet, there is little that is being done on the international front by, all those watchdogs, so to speak.
Okay, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. There are 7 very clear United Nations Security Council and a few of the General Assembly resolutions. The Indian government has flatly and blatantly refused to act upon these resolutions, which is very sad. And like the Palestinian issue, this is one of the oldest unresolved issue on the agenda of the United Nations Security Council, which is a pity. But going back, to Articles 370 and other articles like 35A and 356, they were promulgated in 1952 because then the Indian Prime Minister had promised with the world and also with the then Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Liaquat Ali Khan, that this is being done to give a special status to Kashmir, pending its resolution according to the UN Security Council resolutions. And even Lord Mountbatten had very clearly indicated that the final solution of the Kashmir problem lies in a plebiscite. Well, then, all these promises were not followed. But while these articles were promulgated, that instrument of accession, the fake instrument of accession, was clearly mentioned by Indian constitutions, and which had actually said that Kashmir will accede to India, but the Indian constitution will not be applicable to it, except as it relates to only 3 aspects, which is defense, foreign affairs, and communications. And it was only the Kashmir Assembly which could actually finish these resolutions. But in 2019, when the Indian government decided to revoke these articles, the Kashmir Assembly had already been dissolved. And therefore, all these actions were illegal. Unfortunately, the Indian Supreme Court did not take up this case, despite a number of requests against that. It took this case up only, I think, 6 months after Modi was re-elected. Modi was re-elected in 2019 because of the abrogation of these articles, and it was done essentially for him to get political advantage. And as the previous speaker very rightly said, all the other rationale given by him, like peace and prosperity and security and development, etc., They were all based on lies. And of course, the worst thing is that the Indian Supreme Court then took up the case only 4 or 5 months before the April election in 2024 and endorsed Modi's policy on the subject, once again to give him a big advantage in the elections. So it was, through the Indian Supreme Court that twice India has been given an electoral advantage, which is again does not speak well of the Indian judicial system, which is now almost a slave and a party to what the Hindutva followers are doing there.
General Sab, let me include Altaf Hussain Wani Sab, and then I'll come back to you. Altaf Sab, can you hear me?
Yeah.
There is, what General Saab is talking about, the connivance, of course, of Supreme Court of India, one has to say, in, camouflaging the designs of the Indian government, in trying to give it legal cover, in trying to ensure that, they follow their nefarious designs as far as, changing the demographic in Kashmir is concerned, are right before us. As far as the situation there at this time is concerned, could you tell us a little bit about that?
You see what Jadoo Saab said and earlier Wasi Saab said, I go with those remarks of the speakers. What the situation in occupied Kashmir right now is, after the Indian 5 years of disempowerment, disengagement of the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, putting all the political leaders behind bars, taking away all the rights of the people, and changing the demographic rules and all those things. But what we see after the 5 years application, we see the people of Kashmir have resisted in their own way to all these mechanization of the Indian government. We recently saw in the parliament elections which were held in occupied Kashmir, the defeats were awarded to the proxies of the BJP, and also even the what we say, Omar Abdullah, the BJP, the National Council leader, and Mahbooba Mufti like leaders, they all were defeated. This says that the people of Indian occupied Kashmir have not only resisted the Indian the tools which they used against the people of Kashmir, but they have shown their resistance to ballot also, that we are not going to budge before the Indian mechanization. This is one part of it. The second part of it is that BJP, after failing to have their own candidates in Indian occupied Kashmir, or winning the Jammu by mere margins in the Jammu, they saw that the line that they are not going to have their desired intent what they had when they abrogated Article 370 and 35A, that they will have a Hindu chief minister in Indian occupied Kashmir, or they will have a proxy of their own as a chief minister in occupied Kashmir. They saw it, then they again, before the elections which are scheduled to be held according to Supreme Court judgment in the coming September, they have transferred all the powers from the state legislature or from the chief minister to the lieutenant governor of Indian occupied Kashmir. This means that they are not going to give the power to that state assembly or that the chief minister which will be elected there in occupied Kashmir. They will not give them the power. The powers will be exercised by the men from Delhi. That means that BJP wants to rule Kashmir from Delhi. They know that the people of Kashmir, whosoever who be in the power, will not abide by the orders of the Delhi, what the Delhi is currently doing in Kashmir. So we also saw that what India propagated over the years, that there is a normalcy in occupied Kashmir. The normalcy mantra of India has fallen flat because they are bringing more and more army in Kashmir. They are not repealing any of the draconian laws. You saw very few days back on 15th and 16th of July, when India came under tenure in the UN Human Rights Committee, how the committee posed questions to the Indian delegation about the human rights in Indian occupied Kashmir as well as in the India also. So the India is caught on the wrong foot in Kashmir. We saw a report by the 20 eminent persons of India, including the 4 army generals, Supreme Court judge, foreign secretaries, 4 foreign secretaries, their report says that the 5 years that Modi government has put Kashmir in such a circumstance that it is very difficult to repair what is happening in Kashmir.
Let me come back to you on that note. Dr. Awais, you heard what Wani Sab is saying. Of course, it's difficult to ignore what's happening within Kashmir, and of course it's happening with the connivance of all, whether we talk about the Supreme Court, whether we talk about the government, which is led by Modi, we talk about, their armed forces. It's a concentrated effort. But the question for us is that as we continue to stand behind our Kashmiri brethren, is it going to, what is it going to take for the people or the international community to take notice of the brutality that's happening there?
Yes, since Wani Sab has rightly depicted the plight of Kashmiris in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, I think that when it comes to the international organizations or international institutions or international bodies, their response or their stance or their policy, especially towards India, is shaped by geopolitical experiences. And because of these imperatives, perhaps they couldn't take a just stance which they take in other regions. For example, when it comes to Ukraine or when it comes to other conflicts in Middle East.
Because it's because of course they are perpetuated, they are outlined by their own vested interests.
Exactly. And I think that this kind of condonation and this kind of indifferent attitude by the powerful capitals, I think it's very irresponsible. For example, India's crimes, they are so blatant, they are so visible. For example, I can give a lot of examples. One is recently I came across a report, and in that report published in The Wire, a documentary titled Infiltrating Australia, India's Secret Voice. In that documentary is basically based on the Indian diaspora accounts, people who are living, Indian people who are living in Australia, and they have become the target of Indian spy agencies. And same is the case with Canada.
This is exactly, I want to come to that. This is an example of, you've given an example of Australia, which is documented.
Documented. So my point is, for example, in Australia, there are some reports in Germany, United Kingdom, leading newspaper The Guardian also carried a very comprehensive story on that. Washington Post wrote an editorial mentioning the names. Name of Edith Dovell is also mentioned. The states that indicates that to which level this kind of
they've gone and to which level they permeate into different countries and nations and their autonomy.
Exactly. This is one part, and in that in that context, the response that should have come from the powerful capitals, unfortunately that is not there. This is number one. Secondly, recently we came across reports of uranium theft.
Okay.
But there is again a silence. Indian authorities, they have arrested some individuals.
Okay.
But when it comes to Pakistan or when it comes to Iran, there are some other statements that we see that.
Let me go to Gen R Sab on this. Gen R Sab, I hope you've been following what Dr. Awais is saying. As far as India's trajectory, the way they permeate into and infiltrate the autonomy of other nations. It's not just Pakistan. We've also seen it happen in Canada. We've also seen, like Awais Sab is saying, as far as Australia is concerned, Washington Post talks about it. There are numerous accounts now. But the question is, when it's consistently ignored, is it, the facade, is the facade cracking? Do you think that, now, or do you think they've gone too far and the vested interests or the interests which are dictated by economics as far as world powers are concerned will have to perhaps at some time take a step back from that?
Well, I think I would agree with whatever has been said on that account, that the Indian friends like the United States and others who are encouraging it, not to follow the UN Security Council resolutions because of their own designs against China and against others. That is very unfortunate. But I'd like to come back, to say that whatever decision India took in revoking the status of Kashmir has made both India as well as Kashmir much more insecure than it was, both militarily, because India is spending about $75 billion every year just to keep Kashmir under its grip. And because of the standoff with China in 2020 on account of Ladakh, that expenditure has now increased at least by 20%, which the people of India, probably it has been hidden from the people of India, but I think that is eventually in the long run going to be unsustainable. And that is again related also to ensure that, when $75 billion are being spent on defense, then 75% of that is being spent in Kashmir just to retain it. The people of India need to know that. And the Indian government has failed, and because Kashmir is still one of the largest open air jail in the world, with one Indian security force person to every 10 Kashmiris. And this is going on. And I think the insecurity has increased, so it is not untenable for them. And the earlier they realize, the better it would be. And as I said, they have now shifted a very large amount of their forces from the Jammu area and the surrounding area now to the Chinese borders. And now you are seeing, that insecurity in those areas is increasing. It has been pointed out now by Indian analysts, and the Indian government does not know what to do about that. So I think all these things put together, that decision, as I said earlier, was taken.
Let me go to Altaf Sab on this. Altaf Sab, what General Sab rightly says, he talks about a drain on the resources as far as India is concerned. He also talks about how the people of India perhaps are not being told or not aware the extent to which this adventurism is costing India and it's costing their people. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, actually, it was seen in the recent elections in India also. When we saw the recent elections happening in India, we thought that Modi will contest these elections on the mantra which they were used to have, that we have a development in the whole of India, we are the Vishwa Guru and all that. They will rely on that. But what transpired after that, they had to rely on the Kashmir, Pakistan or Muslim rhetoric against the Pakistan, against the Muslims and Kashmiris, because that in India, they saw that the tragedy in India was different, because people came to know the unemployment in India has risen. There has been lots of protests for that, and there have been many other fault lines involved with the Indian. And India, the way India is holding Kashmir, as General Sahab said, spending a lot of money on Kashmir and all that, and telling to the world audience and as well as Kashmir, we are doing all that development in Kashmir. Unfortunately, some of our people say see those roads and bridges and they say there is very development. Those are all defense-related projects which India is forced to do. There is nothing for the people of the ordinary people of Indian-occupied Kashmir or the people in the UP and other places face the same kind of disparities, because there is not enough money for the development of those people, and they are being questioned.
What about Modi's popularity within India? We saw what happened in the elections also. What he expected is not what really transpired, and the situation on the ground is perhaps also a depiction of the population's alienation with his policies. Isn't that true?
Yes, the policies which the government of India, the Modi government has adopted in India or in Indian occupied Kashmir, there is more alienation. There is more and more alienation. People are not with them, as we have already discussed that how people resisted to that. Modi and India, they claimed that there will be 400 police, but we saw they were forced to have the government which is dependent on certain elements, which tomorrow they can take away their support and they will, this government will be down. And the same way, we saw the resentment from the people of Indian occupied Kashmir, from the people of Ladakh. Even in Ladakh, the BJP was defeated. So there is more and more alienation on each and every level, because the government policies, the Indian government policies in India or in Indian occupied Kashmir. In occupied Kashmir, every step was taken to disempower the Muslims of Kashmir, to discriminate against them. Now you see the quota system which they have introduced, and the quota system, 70% of the jobs or other things will go to on quota, and only 30% are left with the open merit. So this is again the discrimination against the people of Kashmir. The people of Kashmir values speak Kashmir, where there is no social cause, there is no tribe or anything. They are purely, they have to get the job on merit. So this is total discrimination against them. So how they can buy the Modi's argument or their argument of development or their argument of employment in Kashmir? Likewise, the Indian minorities, the way they are facing those Muslims, Dalits and all other people, what they are facing.
It's a reflection of the way that, I'm going to go to Dr. Awais. Dr. Awais, it's also a reflection of the way that the Indian minorities are looking at what's happening in Kashmir and the way that it's having a spillover effect within India. We saw what happened, what's happening to the Muslims. We've seen what's happening to the Christians there. Overall, and this is really a spillover effect from Kashmir, because the Indians themselves, the minorities within India are watching, and even the intelligentsia. We've seen certain segments of society, people who are, of course, their writers also have highlighted this, their books have been written, papers have been written on the way that India continues to create this kind of, fascism. It continues to create and perpetuate this extremism. Isn't that true?
Exactly. When we see the last decade ruling led by BJP, so this thing has been permeated, especially all the organs of the state. And in democracy, what happens is that all organs of the state, they operate independently. For example, executive operates independently from judiciary and judiciary from parliament. But there is a nexus at institutional level. We see that whatever is executive is doing it, Supreme Court or the High Courts or the judiciary, that gives credence and justification to whatever executive is doing it. I can give a number of examples.
Gives them a legal cover,
legal cover,
so to speak. Yes.
Legal cover. When the vandalizing or demolishing of churches, there is no ruling which goes against. There, for example, that they in one report which I came across, it was decided by the government that 500 mosques should be demolished, but the Supreme Court gave credence to that. Similarly, if you see many other incidents, I can quote number of very, very important. BJP member Maya Kodani, who was sentenced to 28 years in jail for her part in murder of 97 people in 2008, he was acquitted by the judiciary. Similarly, in Hyderabad Makkah Masjid case, 2008, acquitted all accused, because these people, they were associated with Abhinav Bharat. Abhinav Bharat is the organization that is attached with BJP. Famous infamous in this case, Samjhota Express case, in 2019 acquitted all 4 men involved in bombing the train linking India and Pakistan. So similar, you can say, so these are number of incidents. You are talking about the minorities.
Yes.
Muslims, they are 14% according to the reports, and this is such population constitutes the whole countries in the world. So this, you cannot take it in the strict sense of the word of the minority.
It's a significant,
population.
yes, it's a significant chunk
when
of
you
the
see
population,
Muslims or Sikhs or Christians or scheduled tribe or scheduled caste, if you take all together, and the persecution and the incidents of lynching, the incident of marginalization which we see in India, I think that it belies India's claim, which which is enshrined in its constitution. But now in this, the third term, we see there is some silver lining, and that silver lining is that Modi, BJP or other leadership, that they were expecting that they would get at least 370 on their own and 400 in total, but even they could not make significant difference in the Hindi hinterland. What to talk of South and the other parts of India, they were expecting that they would get maximum. Even they in Punjab, for example, that they faced setback. So I think that now those voices that you have alluded to, civil society voices and some journalists and some senior voices, we find the echo of those voices in the larger society.
But do you think, General Sab, when we talk about this, we talk about a change perhaps, are we being optimistic? Are we being, as far as the voters are concerned, when we say that, Modi's perhaps defeat or the win that he's had is indicative of his policies, in the sense that the numbers reflect that people are not satisfied with his pro-extremist policies, and that is having an effect. But do you think that that the facade of it and the fact that how the world sees India is significantly crumbling, or our role in trying to ensure that the world sees India for what it is? Are we doing enough, and where do you think that our concentration should be? Let's talk about that now.
Well, I think you're now talking about our Kashmir policy and the solution to this issue. So first of all, I'd very clearly say that the policy of colonialist settlers, like what India is doing, that first it sent about 25,000 non-residents to Kashmir who no more now want to live with them. Then it sent some Kashmiri Pandits in, to the valley. They don't want to stay there. So like, Gaza and the West Bank, I think that policy is not going to work there for obvious reasons. But having said that, I think it is not only the local population of the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir who are extremely bitter on the loss of their status, the loss of their status as a state, the loss of their flag, the loss of their authority to make their own laws, and so on and so forth, but also the entire Kashmiri diaspora living abroad. And I think both of them, more than the government of Pakistan, they should start a social media campaign for awareness of the world, as is happening by the Palestinians. I think they are very active and very effective in highlighting, what is happening there in Palestine. And I think that is an area on which both the government of Pakistan as well as the Kashmiri leaders, both in India as well as in Pakistan, must work and work. They should work very closely amongst each other. And at the same time, I think funding must be raised for this purpose internationally, for this very purpose, to influence those governments who are supporting India to violate all the United Nations Security Council resolutions, and who is encouraging India to violate the human rights of Kashmiris and Muslims in India.
There is, with the same, Altaf Sab, you heard what General Sab is saying. When we talk about the role of the Kashmiri diaspora all over, the world, do you think in terms of agitating social media, of course, and I think General Sab raises a very fair point when he talks about the way that the social media actually, permeated the facade that, even major networks around the world were trying to paint vis-a-vis Israel and Palestine. So there is a huge role that social media can play in showing the real picture. Isn't that true? And maybe, you know, there needs to be more concentration there.
Yes, that's true. Whatever has been happening internationally, whatever support we have at international level, whatever you have read in different international newspapers about Kashmir, whatever is coming in the Human Rights Council, whatever is being debated in the Human Rights Committee or other places, this is all what came out through social media. It came out through the people of Indian occupied Kashmir, the younger generation of Indian occupied Kashmir who are risking their lives, making this news to come out. Otherwise, there is complete calm down on the news, on the human rights and other things that should not come out of Kashmir. But these are smuggled by our younger generation. They are risking their lives. And on that count, our younger generation who migrated to different places, who are in Washington Post, Guardian, other places, they have assumed their position at the editorial level. They are writing, they are putting all, we have that in. And similarly, whatever the space we have at international level, awareness, that has been created through social media by our people because we don't have other mediums to agitate our voice. So I think that it's good that General Saab said that our diaspora, yes, they will have to play more involved role in, rather than being on the streets. They will have to create some literature. They will have to create some something intellectually to counter the Indian propaganda intellectually, rather than being on the streets. They will have to counter that in the different think tanks. They will have to counter that in the different parliaments.
Having said that, the real, you know, there's a very real reality of the clout as far as India is concerned, whether, you know, their economic advantages that the world may see India offer. And of course, you know, there are, we've seen no friends but only allies in the world of world politics. And how does one counter that, in your opinion? Is it possible to counter that at all?
Yes, it is possible to counter. What Indians did against us last 15 to 20 years, you have seen that this info lab, what they created, and that was that sometimes people thought that it is true. What the Indian websites, those fake websites and those fake organizations would paint the picture of Kashmir resistance, they paint the picture of Pakistan and all that. And that's why we saw the change in the minds of some people. They thought it is true. So you have to keep on telling the people that this is true. This is a bright perspective of the thing. When you keep on telling, when you keep on showing them the real picture of it, they will definitely hold it. You saw, I told you earlier, that in Human Rights Committee, it were the 26 international NGOs who had submitted a counter report to the Indian report. They countered the India. It is not we. It is not the people from Kashmir could not come. They could not go there. It was the international NGOs from different parts of the world those put that parallel report there, and on that report, Indian delegation was they were caught red-faced in that committee of experts there. So that these things do matter. This is not only that we know, yes, India is a big economy that we currently say, but that's not enough. We have seen the big economy tumbling, the kind of polarization in India, what currently there is. We are not talking about that.
Fair enough. Let me, Awais Sab, I have very limited time, but your last comments on, you know, of course, on the one hand, like, you know, General Sab also said, and Altaf Sab also, the world has to see India for what it's doing. But there's also, you know, we talked about what's happening as far as Canada is concerned, as far as other nations in the world is concerned. For that reason alone, do you think that there is, you know, going to be a stepping back by India? There has to be.
You know, this is you know, a kind of debate which needs to be looked into the context of hard power and soft power. So India does have the advantage in terms of hard power and diplomatic clout that India is enjoying, as I mentioned earlier, because of some, you know, world politics or geopolitical considerations. But I think that shouldn't stop us or the Kashmiris from waging raising the voice for their rights, and they have been doing it. And I think that this voice needs to be raised, and in an institutional way, not in a haphazard way. For example, one thing that we have been persistently asking is that a proper lawfare, including the senior lawyers and who have legal acumen, they should be inducted so that the legal case should be projected across the world, and especially in the concerned quarters, number one. And as Wani sir very rightly pointed out, that the reports that we see in different newspapers and different publishers, publishing houses, so it means that there is some input which is going on. So I think that that input should be amplified, and that could only be amplified that if we can generate that material, material based on different aspects of Kashmir that could be related to
and
law.
Consistently so.
Consistently that we have been doing it. Kashmiri diaspora belonging to AJK or Indian occupied Kashmir living in the West, I think they need to be engaged so that they can produce some studies, and those studies later on they could be published. They could produce some films and documentaries so that they could be later on screened and released.
And of course, the power of social media is
exactly. So I think that this material is, if it is prepared and if it could be propagated or projected through social media,
used in a systematic manner, it will certainly
have the
effect. Thank you so much for being with us. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Awais Bin Wasi. Thank you for being with us. Lieutenant General Raza Muhammad, thank you for your very valuable time. Altaf Hussain Wani Sab, thank you for being with us today. Of course, as we observe Yawm-e-Istihsal on the 5th of August, this is a time of reflection. It's also a time where, perhaps a more renewed, a more concentrated, a more systemic effort needs to be made towards furthering the Kashmiri cause. Of course, Pakistan has consistently stood by Kashmir. We've always amplified the brutality and the concerns of our Kashmiri brethren, the brutality that they suffer at the hands of India. And the way that it's been camouflaged, the way the facade that is shown to the world needs to be broken indefinitely. And let's hope that we can do that, and let's hope the world sees India for what it's doing to Kashmiris. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.